Here we go. All right. All right. This is our October land use meeting, October 18th. We're starting a little late. We've got a few speakers here today, and we're going to get an update from Melissa Horn, our District 1 Sandoval aide on land use updates. All right, Melissa, please let us know what you've got on your side. I have posted links to the most current land use document that you guys have on your website.
Fantastic. So with the exception of what is in that land use update, two things. One, the councilwoman has submitted a budget request to the mayor for a 38th Avenue study going from Inca all the way to Sheridan. Basically, this has been in the works and been on their list since 2012 and still has not received funding. So she has requested that funding for $500,000. She received a supermajority vote from the other council members to put that on the letter to the mayor. And we are hopeful that that can receive some funding so that it can dovetail with the near Northwest area plan and the work that's being done there.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the study itself? Because I apologize, I'm not familiar with it. Maybe other folks on this call are, but I don't think we've heard of or talked about it. So if you maybe just a quick, background on, the 38th to Sheridan.
So this is back in 2011, the city commissioned a report from Puma about 38th Avenue. And one of the things that came forth is a study needs to be done on the transportation and land use of 38th Avenue. It talked about the narrow sidewalks being difficult for pedestrians to traverse, talked about difficult intersections, the narrow parts of 38th Avenue that make having multimodal, adequate bus, bike, and pedestrian usage of that difficult. Inadequate land usage near some of the transportation areas, especially closer to Inca, but all along 38th Avenue, 38th and Federal, of course, being one of them. So we want to have that information done, have a study done, looking at how we can safely create these multimodal connections and what advice we can give to the near Northwest area plan and to zoning in general, so that as the areas are developed, that they're done in accordance with what the study recommends.
Is there a document that was discussed with at council or somewhere that you can give us a link to? And then, I don't know. Okay.
I mean, I'm happy to, there is the link to the mayor's letter, and I'm happy to give you that.
Okay.
There is but because the study hasn't been conducted, there's not a study to share.
But the request for the study, I guess I'm looking for the document that would have been the request for the study. And I guess if that letter is what it is, then that's fine.
It sounds like it would be a lot more than it actually is, but I'm happy to drop a link to that in the chat.
Sure.
It's going to be a PDF download, just as a warning to everyone. But yes, it's a list of the items that council members prioritized in their request to the mayor, because at the end of every budget season, so when we start budget season, every agency and department comes and presents their budgets to council. Council then reviews those and looks for anything that doesn't match council's priorities and then makes recommendations. So every council member can make recommendations, but they need the support of their other council members to get them elevated to the mayor. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So give me a minute and I will absolutely drop that link in the chat. But you'll see there's several other priorities listed there. The councilwoman actually asked for two priorities, one being 38th Avenue and the other being the Children's Advocacy Center, which is in Sloan's Lake, right off Federal, 21st and Federal, which they provide counseling and, hold on here, they do forensic interviewing of children that are suspected abuse victims. The city used to fund them, but then decided to combine all forensic interviews under the Department of Human Services, so DDHS. But it doesn't have a specific children's portion to it. And she feels that it would be best to keep the children or provide children a more customized experience when they need to be interviewed and need assistance, unfortunately. So just 1 second. And then the other thing I will mention is that we are continuing our work. We are working to submit the Sunnyside overlays. And we hope to be able to share some information about their posting here very soon. So we will certainly let you guys know when that has happened.
But it's close.
It is very close. We have submitted, but it has not yet been posted.
And as soon as it is, we will make sure to include it in all of SUNI communications, and we'll probably need to send a note to the PCD distribution list in the middle of the month rather than along with our next meeting, because it will probably be coming up before the end of the month.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone will receive a postcard once this is posted. The community planning and development, they will start their postcards, sending their postcards, but they are not, due to scheduling issues, they are not expected to begin posting or sending postcards till at least the 21st, I believe.
Yep.
So that is it from me.
Okay, great. What do we have next on updates? I apologize. I'm now on two different screens. All right, so you already covered the conservation overlay update, so we can kind of skip that. That is really the only update that we have, is that it's about to go to planning board, but it's going to have a 30-day community feedback period, and then it goes to planning board. So we're just waiting for CPD to initiate the 30-day period, and all the folks who are impacted by this will be the ones getting the postcard, correct? Not everyone in the neighborhood, the folks who are actually impacted.
That is correct. If your property is impacted. And then if all remains on track, we should be at planning board December 7th.
Great, thank you very much. And in the links in the agenda, you'll see the full document that Councilwoman Sandoval's office puts out for each of the neighborhoods with land use. So you can see everything else that's going on there as well. Next up, Bill, can you cover the near Northwest area plan update?
Sure. Hopefully everybody on the call is receiving email updates. And as you see those, you'll see that over the last 3 weeks, the planning department was starting to roll out some of its draft recommendations. A lot of it is very preliminary, really, in some cases, just sharing several ideas and looking for continuing feedback from the neighborhood. Hopefully everybody was able to make either the virtual workshop or one of the other 3 workshops. If by chance you were not able to, and you'd like to get caught up, or if you have questions, there are now times set up for one-on-one discussions with city planners. Those are published in the emails that they have coming out, and you can also find them on the website. They're on October 18th, 19th, 24th, and 27th. And then for those of you that are interested in what is being called the Sunnyside Industrial Area, there is a meeting at 1 o'clock a week from Monday. I think that's the 24th. But it is a week from Monday, even if I have the date wrong. 1 o'clock at the Aztalan Rec Center, I believe, where we'll be essentially in a workshop mode to go over some of the ideas that the city has come up with, working with the consultants, and seeing if that jives with those of us that have been involved in giving them quite a bit of detailed input, see if it jives with what we were hoping they were going to come back with. So that might be a meeting that would be of interest to some of you. So it'll be later this fall or into the winter before the recommendations start to become more formalized. And there'll continue to be engagement with the community to get feedback from what the city tells us. They expect that once recommendations start to firm up, that's when people start to get engaged, when they see something they like or they don't like. So we expect that to happen and look forward to that greater engagement. So I think that pretty much covers where we're at.
Great. I do think we.
One last point. There are also a number of surveys that the city is looking for people to contribute to, and those are also on the planning near Northwest planning site, as well as in the emails that hopefully most of you are getting.
Yep, that was it. Thanks. I was just going to say that. All right, I'm going to have to mute. All right, I've got my other computer working. My husband turned it on for me. And on the surveys, and on the emails, I think if you should sign up for their email distribution, then you'll get all of the email updates. Otherwise, SUNI did share all the links to the survey in our newsletter that went out earlier this week, maybe Sunday, Monday. If you go to the Near Northwest website, and during the next presentation, I'll put a link in there in terms of how to get involved. All those surveys are there right now. And on the industrial meeting, I don't know if they're public or not, to be honest with you, but I don't, I know I'm on that and I will be there. I'm not sure who's. I know the folks with the businesses involved. I'm not sure if that meeting is public or not, but come there and listen in.
Yeah, I think you're right that it's not promoted as widely, but I think anybody that has interest is welcome to come and join the group. And certainly anybody that's participating in our land use and planning within the neighborhood would be very welcome.
And we sure could use engagement, that's for sure. To Bill's point, I think Bill was at a couple of meetings. I could only make the Chaffee, but I saw the Facebook Live of Highlands and Jefferson. I think they had the most people. Chaffee, there was just a handful. And again, just a few at the meeting for Sunnyside. So I hope the consultants are correct that there's going to be more engagement, but right now it's pretty disappointing, the amount of engagement we've had, and mostly from the standpoint of there's very few voices that are weighing in on draft recommendations. And I think more people should engage. Otherwise, things are going to happen without, your input. So definitely, take those surveys and stay in the loop. And we certainly will bring you information on how to get involved at these meetings as much as we can. And thanks for folks, Melissa, thanks for putting in those focus surveys in the link there. Any questions on Near Northwest? All right, seeing none. I think, so Rod is not on, so we're gonna pass that. Basically, Rod had a idea to get people out and walking around and also collecting data. And he was going to use a grant to do this, but basically having people walk around kind of a block or two around their house, kind of less than a quarter mile, but in that range, and look to see if you have services such as a park, services that you need, and this would be a way of collecting data about, do we have complete neighborhoods, what's missing, things like that. And also it would be interactive and fun. And, we can do more of these and collect more data. So we'll ask Rod when, to give us an update next time, or if he's ready to deploy. SUNI will be putting it out on all of their platforms. So That was what, Rod was working on. And we have nothing for final review. So we're gonna move on to Matt's presentation. He went through kind of pro forma issues, pro forma aspects of development, but a second part of that was, if we looked at the Sunnyside industrial area and we are looking at the draft recommendations, which seem to be, potentially 5 to 8 stories in different parts of the industrial area, we asked Matt to, if he could, using his skill sets and his tools, to visualize this for us, so we can kind of get an idea of, well, if it was fully built out and everybody was at that rate at 5 or 8, what would that look like? And this is really just a starting point for us to start discussing, well, now what's missing? How could you add a layer onto that would include having everybody within a quarter mile of a park or open space? How could you add, complete streets and such and things like that? And I don't have all the answers. It's just a conversation for us to have about what that area will look like. So that was the reason for me asking Matt to do something like this, was for us to kind of benefit from a visual and a conversation. So Matt, I think you should be able to share your screen. Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you talking to me?
Oh, no. Matt
Okay.
Chiodini, the architect. But Matt, hey, how are you? Thanks for joining.
Got nervous for a sec. You're on mute, other Matt.
If not, we're going to have to push you back and we'll jump over to Newbin. Okay. Hey, Matt. You turned mute off, so I'm assuming you're there. No, he went back on mute. I'm not sure what's going on with Matt. So Claire, would you like to go next?
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, and you should be able to share your screen because I think you'll have the permission. So if you got it on your desktop and you want to share this, a quick intro. Claire reached out to Sunnyside. She was interested in our sustainability committee. I had a conversation with her with what she does and her background. She works for a consulting company, and I'll let her share more about that. But there was some intersection between the kind of work she does and the things that could inform the stuff that we do. So I asked her to, first of all, would she like to join the committee, right? That's always the first question. But that's a not yet, we don't have time. But I asked her to put together something about, what are the state and city regulations on green codes? And then what are best practices and what are the things we're not doing? And again, it's important for us because of, all the new development that's going to be happening on near the light rail station. So Claire, go ahead, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then you can jump into your presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Pulling up that screen now. You guys should be seeing something that says Green Building Overview.
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So thanks, Tripti, for that intro. My name is Claire. I moved to Sunnyside in May, so it's been almost 6 months, which is exciting. And I'm a research associate, as Tripti said, for a sustainability consulting firm that's based here in Denver. Lotus Engineering and Sustainability. That's why there's a little Lotus next to my name. I'm not here on behalf of Lotus. I'm here just as, kind of as Tripti said, a passionate resident. Sustainability is a large part of my life. And I've been working in that world for about 2 years now. And many of our recent projects for my consulting work have been related to green building, looking at codes and standards and that best practices piece. I will say right now, I am not an engineer, or if Matt is on the call, I'm not an architect either, or an HVAC specialist or anything like that. But like I said, just kind of been doing a lot of deep dives in our recent work. So This is going to be kind of a high level overview of what's happening to my knowledge in Denver, but Melissa, you're here too, so you might have something to add if you're informed about the new legislation, so please feel free to jump in, and also Matt, you as well, or if anybody is in this space. Yeah, so that's me. I'm about to throw kind of a lot of slides at you. So quick, just little overview of what I'll go over, kind of why green building is important, the basics of it and where those leverage points are in codes and zoning, and then the basics of green building concepts, what certifications and standards are out there if you want to go beyond code, and then sort of that impact spectrum of good, better, best development standards. And then for that opportunities for Sunnyside piece, I'd like that to come more from you. I'll admit that I'm not so well informed on what's happening in the neighborhood itself, but hopefully we can take some of these ideas and concepts and apply those. And then Q&As at the end, but please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions and I'll do my best to answer them or connect you to people who can answer them if I can't. And also last little note, my desktop is over here and you guys are over here. So if you see me looking, I'm just looking at my slides. Okay, awesome. So why green building? I work in sustainability, so climate change is a very glaring issue in my world and everyone else's. It's happening right here in Colorado in very tangible ways. You know, we see the wildfires and the droughts, but kind of beyond those natural disasters, it's also a public health issue. It's impacting our air quality, our water quality, and these are things that, you know, are impacting our communities locally too. So it's an issue here that we need to tackle. And what that quote in the black box is someone from the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. They're kind of the authoritative body that release all of the reports that we rely on for the scientific studies about climate change. And I just think it captures nicely the potential for buildings to be a tool in climate action. And that starts to come from codes and those standards and those certifications. And to that last bullet, you know, Sunnyside is a small community, but that local community action and that local leadership can go a long way. And kind of a few other stats to throw at you. For greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, about 40% of those come from buildings. And then globally, I think it's about a third. And 2/3 of the structures that will be around in 2050 will be built between now, today, and then 2050. So the point of that is keeping in mind that what we build today, how we build it, where we build it, it's going to be profoundly important in how it impacts our emissions, either reduction efforts or if it impacts emissions negatively. So some benefits to green building is if we do it correctly, we're reducing emissions, we're reducing energy use, water use, and waste. It can provide some operational cost savings. It can increase the asset value of that building in a variety of ways. That could be a whole other presentation, but studies have shown that tenants of green buildings might be willing to pay some more for a building that increases both indoor and outdoor quality of life, essentially. There's improvements in occupant health and well-being, and then it helps communities become a little bit more resilient. So diving into building code, there's a code body, they're called the International Code Council, and through a vetting process and committee meetings, they come up with these code documents, and the cycles update every 3 years. So the most recent cycle is the 2021 code, but Denver currently is on the 2018 code. And what's shown here is the International Energy Conservation Code. So we have a couple different types, but the Energy Conservation Code is typically the one that we look at in the green building space because it tackles those bullets that you see here. Energy efficiency through equipment, making your building envelope, you know, your walls, your doors, your windows, in a way that helps regulate temperature better, lighting efficiency, ventilation, and then on-site solar. All of these are tackled within that code. And then I won't dwell on this graph, but this basically shows the code cycles over the years and how they've increased energy efficiency of buildings, which is awesome. And then how they will hopefully in the next few code cycles continue to improve energy efficiency even more. But I'll say that these are the base codes and that we can take a bit more of a comprehensive approach or go a little bit further. And I might refer to those throughout the presentation as above code standards. So we've got base 2021 International Energy Conservation Code, and then we can go beyond that. Lots of legislation has been happening in the state of Colorado. The first on the left of the screen tackles new construction. And basically a law was passed that says in July of 2023, if you are a jurisdiction in Colorado that is planning on updating your building code, and yes, there are jurisdictions in Colorado that don't even have a building code. And if they choose not to update it, this law will not apply to them. But if you do, which many communities are, you have to bring it up to that most recent code cycle, which is the 2021. And then that EV ready, electric ready, and solar ready piece, what that means basically is for EV, for example, you don't actually have to put in a EV charger, but you will have to put in the wiring, the conduit, the pathways. So later on, if you want to retrofit the parking space to install a charger, it'll be way less expensive and that wiring's already there. And then the same goes for electric ready, and that's more for appliances like your heating, space heating and water heating systems, your cooking appliances, things like that. And then solar ready, as it sounds, that's again, preparing the building to install solar with that wiring, that conduit, that allocating appropriate space, things like that. So you're not mandated to actually put those on the building. It's just preparing for the future. And then once 2030 rolls around, the state is convening an energy code board, and they are figuring out a code that will bring buildings to net zero, meaning those buildings produce as much energy as they consume. And then for new and existing buildings, another piece of legislation came down the line that says, if you're a building owner of a building that's 50,000 square feet or more, you have to annually benchmark your energy use. And that just basically means tracking and reporting your energy use. And you have to submit that report to the state. And then that kind of gets at the idea of you can't manage what you don't know, right? So the benchmarking is the knowing piece. And then the management piece, there's something called the building performance standard that's also coming down the line. That's in the rulemaking process. We don't totally know what it's going to look like yet. But for energy use, a building has what's called energy use intensity. So that's energy consumption of the whole building divided by the square footage of that building. If they don't meet a particular target that's based on the building type, they have to bring that energy use down to meet that that performance target. And that'll come 2027 and 2030. City of Denver took that benchmarking law and made it a little bit more stringent. So it's buildings 25,000 square feet and over. And I don't know if we have buildings that large in Sunnyside, but if new developments are coming down the line that are multifamily residences or larger buildings of that type, that might apply and be worth knowing. Any questions on that or on codes so far?
I'm not seeing any.
Will there be,
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go
will there
ahead.
be any training offered to residential contractors to get them up to speed on building standards to help them reach those efficiency goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Colorado Energy Office has basically a toolkit that has all of those standards and resource guides. And then for that energy performance target and the benchmarking building performance standard piece, I know that they're considering a lot of education and outreach pieces for that to hopefully bring everyone up to speed and make those resources available, and hopefully equitably available as well. So we should have those in multiple languages, and I think those outreach efforts should be tailored to specific communities who need more resources than others, if that's the case. Awesome. And this slide, there's a lot of words on it, but basically it's just to show that I'm not coming at this from, just being a passionate environmentalist. There's a lot of effort in the state and beyond with building codes. For example, Boulder County, there's a code cohort of the county itself, and then a bunch of the cities and municipalities within the county that are working on all coming together to adopt the most recent International Energy Conservation Code, and then strengthening amendments refers to that EV ready, electric ready, solar ready piece. The same type of cohort is going on in Eagle County, which, Vail, Avon, up in the mountains there. City of Denver is also working on updating their codes again. So like I said before, they're at 2018. City of Denver kind of takes it above and beyond. We don't totally know what's coming yet for their commercial codes, but I think what we do have an idea of is that they'll increase efficiency standards of equipment. There'll likely be some requirements for all electric space and water heating, probably some solar, but specifics are TBD for that. And then nationally, there are a bunch of example codes to look at as well. So,
Hey, Claire, I've got a question.
Sure.
Speaking about the, city of Denver and this all electric space and water heating, right?
yeah.
So assuming they adopt, the new codes and whatever timeline, right, for having it be that, it would mean, and please correct me if I'm not looking at this right, folks who are building today should be building either to these standards or they need to be easily converted to the standards, because if buildings are coming up today and they're going to last 30, 50 years, and these codes are going to, the restrictions are going to hit them. So and the reason I'm saying that is because as folks come and talk to us about rezoning, and they're planning on building a couple hundred units, maybe we should be asking them whether they're building it today so that they can be adaptable when the time comes. So, do we think that that's what's going to happen, is that you build today, even though those restrictions aren't needed, you will eventually have to, adapt your existing building to the new codes. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You're getting at exactly the right idea. And that concept of the readiness with, the different qualifiers before that, whether that looks at EV or that all electric equipment or solar, that's an attempt to say, okay, if you're not ready to, convert all of your systems, or if you're not all ready to build something new with all electric systems, you'll save some costs for retrofitting. And we call that future proofing, because we know all of this is coming down the line. So if we can't convince a new development to take on those specific equipment pieces, we might be able to convince them to do that pre-wiring and that building future proofing.
So does the city, and I don't know what our city does right now when folks are building this, are they requiring them to future proof, or just recommending they future proof? And I'm just curious whether that's something that we should be pushing some of the new development for, is this future proofing, or if the city's already saying you better future proof. This is a question we've not even asked, any of these developers. We're just beginning to kind of get into that space. So I was curious whether that's already something they're being told by the city to do on these larger buildings.
Yeah, so I would say City of Denver is working on pushing this pretty hard. And then with this next update of codes, we think that they're most likely going to require that future proofing piece. So if I can, after this presentation, drop some of the City of Denver links in the chat, but there are a couple plans and guiding documents where they're essentially saying, yes, you should absolutely do this. now.
Okay,
And
perfect.
then the 2024 International Energy Conservation Code, that is currently in essentially committee stages where they're looking at proposals and updates to the 2021 code. And we think that there might be some of that readiness requirements in the 2024 code. So unless a jurisdiction adopts the 2024 code, City of Denver couldn't require that if they're only at 2021.
Got it.
But they might push a little harder and make it more stringent.
Thank you.
Yep.
But Trupti, so you know, none of that is currently required.
Yeah.
Especially
Just
since we're 3 years back on the code.
Right, we're at 2018, so we're not
And
even
we
at
already saw the
2021.
green roof initiative get heavily modified away from sustainability. So I think we have a big uphill battle.
This is Matt Chiodini. I was able to get on. Trupti, I think I know where you're trying to go with this. From what we've been telling our clients, it's really don't design for 2 to 3 years out. It's designed for 10 years out at this point. The decisions that we're making from the larger scale multifamily buildings based on the city's requirements are driving us to considerations that, you know, there is a dollar amount, there's a tax to it.
Mhm.
But we, you know, to the question of future proofing, yeah, I mean, we are putting in backbones for solar. We're putting in the entire T of the parking garage as the availability to be EV charging. There are, you know, a lot of things. Water conservation even has become the next kind of major piece. And so over the next decade of code, there's no way to, there's a lot more incentive to just build better than just build what we've been typically building. So I don't think that the neighborhood needs to be as concerned about another step in the process, because the city is covering that and the codes are forcing us to go there.
Great, thank you.
Matt, that makes me happy to hear. Awesome. Trupti, how are we doing on time?
Well, I mean, I flipped through your presentation and it's pretty long.
It
and
is pretty
I was
long,
not sure
yeah.
how you were going to do that in 20 minutes. So, Matt, how much time? I mean, we're at 7:23. We have till 8. These two are the only topics we have. Matt, do you think you can cover your section in about 20 minutes?
Mine's kind of an open forum, so as long as you guys want to spend talking about it.
Okay, so I'm going to say 20 minutes, Claire. That'll give you to 7:40. So you might need to flip through a little quicker, but this is really good. And this presentation is online in our public folder. I encourage folks to actually go through it. And I think, you know, we might have Claire come back another time if we need to as well. But Claire, you've got another 16 minutes.
Awesome. Yeah, the rest of my slides, I'll talk pretty high level about all of them. And then if anyone has any specific questions, again, feel free to interrupt me and jump in. This was basically just about other kind of leverage points in municipal codes that you can use for green building. And then now we're kind of getting into a more comprehensive look beyond codes. So there's this concept of an integrated approach, which is basically a more, oh, someone have something? All good. So it's a more comprehensive approach to building design. It looks, with this integrated approach, you're looking for synergies within building systems and their components. And it's about bringing all parties of a new development together really early on. You know, rather than maybe the architect handing off a blueprint to a general contractor, everyone's involved from even the pre-design phase throughout the development of that building. And then that way you can establish sustainability goals, you can ensure that those goals are being hit throughout the process, And you might be able to address problems that arise in sort of that more holistic way. And that can look like I said, setting those green building goals early on. Design charrettes are common, which are basically workshops with key members of each kind of building team to figure out which strategies you want to prioritize and pursue, and then regular check-ins throughout the process. This is kind of a silly picture, but the point that I'm trying to emphasize with it is the built environment is key to influencing human behavior, right? So if you don't make an area pedestrian friendly, someone might feel the need to walk their dog like this. You can see that there are no sidewalks on this street, or they're working smarter, not harder, I'm not sure. But the point is that buildings can play a huge role in connectivity and, making a place more integrative. And that's something that we want to think about, how it relates to transit and how we can get people to live slightly more greener lives if possible. So kind of reiterating that connectivity piece, thinking about if a building can increase density, maybe you want to build up and not out. Seeing if the building is located in an area with diverse uses or if it can increase the diversity of uses in an area. So Matt, you said you build mixed use buildings, things like that, maybe residential on top and commercial on the bottom. And then is that building site nearby quality transit? Can you make the front of the building pretty pedestrian friendly and help with sidewalk development and bike paths? And can the building help enable multimodal transit essentially? And then can you maybe reduce parking and encourage the adoption of EVs through your building? Main takeaway here, just as I've said before, connectivity. That multimodal piece is really key to climate action. For site sustainability, this kind of gets at the building site itself and how it contributes to a better environment. Step one is controlling construction pollution as the building's being developed. Step two is kind of assessing what's around the site. So, Sunnyside's more urban, that habitat piece isn't as relevant, but thinking about proximity to parks and open spaces, can you build the site to manage stormwater? Heat island reduction is really important in urban environments. So can you put maybe a light colored or a green roof on the building? Consider how much of the paved surfaces are exposed to sunlight and for how long, and then looking at light pollution as well.
Hey, Claire, got a quick question on that, kind of on the heat island, light pollution. Today, there are tools available, and maybe you have access to them, or you're where you could assess this already. So if we were to take a few blocks, in Sunnyside, you can assess things like heat island reduction and light pollution reduction?
Honestly, Matt might know more about that than I do. I don't have an extensive technical knowledge on those tools, admittedly.
There is a website, I think it's darkskies.org. One of the tricks with actually one of the downfalls of energy savings is LED lighting. When we changed out all of our street lights, we inadvertently changed them out for a hue of color that is much brighter, and it actually made most of our urban cores brighter than they were previously. So it's one of those, we do good to inadvertently do bad. And I think that's something that we're going to continue to study as engineers and architects and urban planners, that, but there's huge cost ramifications as well.
So Matt, on the heat island reduction, if we think about what's happening, what we're going to be building over here on the industrial area, do individual developers look at this? Does the city look at this? Does anyone look at this as it, along with the construction and kind of what's happening, all around. I'm just curious whether that's kind of on people's radar. I mean, we all hear about trees and getting trees and, more shade for some of that reduction, but are there any requirements anywhere? I know there are requirements about landscape, but is it really at the level of heat island reduction and what that temperature difference is with the amount of trees that are asked for? I'm just curious whether any metric exists by which we're developing some standards when we're building.
Yeah, I mean, there are, I don't know that anybody's got like a true heat map developed. I haven't seen one of those for Denver.
All right, thank you.
Assuredly, though, as we build every block, one of the things that is, and it's part of the STP forestry piece of your approvals and entitlements, you're rebuilding the green lawn and the tree streetscape. So for every block that we do, we're adding 5 to 10 trees to a site when we look at whole city blocks, as well as an 8-foot tree lawn for the full length of city blocks. Stuff that, landscaping and green space that didn't exist previously. So every one of those little spaces, while they're small in their footprint for a block, it's that overall coverage. I mean, if you look at some of the original photos of Denver, there are no trees, right? We built this environment of trees, and that tree canopy is always serving to help cool things. But I've never seen a heat map of Denver. Be interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I have either, but I wonder, there are a couple climate equity toolkits that might be looking at that.
I'm sure one of our many government agencies, NREL or NOAA, has one.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I can do some digging and try to find something for you, Tripti.
Melissa put something in the chat, a link as well about heat vulnerability. So there's something there. Thank you.
Yeah, they actually do take into account heat island effect and all sorts of things. And there's a map if you click through it.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for that resource, Melissa. Okay, continuing on, almost done, I promise. The next piece, kind of as Matt alluded to, is water efficiency. And this is, of course, a very big one in Colorado. Water efficiency falls into 2 categories: outdoor use and indoor use. And basically with outdoor use is considered consumptive use, which means, it's used and it's not returned to that original water resource, usually because of something like evaporation. Indoor water use is non-consumptive because often it flows back into our drains and maybe treated at a wastewater treatment plant and put back into a source to an extent, not at an 100% return rate, but typically efficiency first is the approach for buildings. And then you can monitor your water use with submeters to track, kind of similar to that benchmarking piece for energy use. And then you can get into strategies like finding innovative ways to maybe recycle non-potable water or something like that. Outdoor use is a little bit more important. So something, a campaign that Sunnyside could do that I've often seen is don't water your sidewalks, right? Be efficient about your irrigation. Low water landscaping or xeriscaping is a common term used for that. But that efficiency is the main takeaway here. With materials and waste, this has kind of come into the forefront of the sustainable building world recently. You might see it as construction and demolition waste, or some people call it construction and deconstruction to add more of a sustainable vocab word to that phrase, I guess. But this starts from materials. So, maybe picking materials of that building that have recycled content, maybe that are produced nearby to reduce transportation emissions from bringing those materials from elsewhere to the site, or possibly repurposed materials as well. And then you're managing the waste that comes from that project. So using as little, there's an issue with bringing in too many materials, I guess, to a building. And again, Matt, maybe you can speak more to this than I can, but attempting to minimize what you need for that project. And then trying to divert that construction waste from the landfill. I think, yes, the stats right here, 40% of the waste that goes to the landfill is from construction. So this is really getting at that piece. And then thinking about your design from the get-go, that integrated approach that I was talking about earlier. One example that we like to use is maybe if a designer were to build a trash cage without checking with the local hauler to see the size of the bins that the hauler uses, you might not have space for that recycling and trash. So, you know, just emphasizing that thoughtful design from the beginning. And then one of the also really important pieces, because we spend about 90% of our time inside buildings, is indoor environmental quality. So kind of going back to that material choice too, buildings should pick materials that minimize impact to indoor air quality, like low emitting paints, adhesives, flooring materials, things like that. And municipalities or private entities, or really any level of government, can put procurement policies in place, or buy clean policies, is sometimes as they're referred to encourage those low emitting materials. And then the rest takes into account sort of that occupant experience of thermal comfort, making sure your ventilation is working properly and there's a lot of air exchanges, clean air coming in. And then do you have views to an outdoor space? Is there daylight coming in? Things like that. But the emphasis here really is on indoor air quality, because that's what we're breathing in for 90% of our time. And then the last one here is energy efficiency. And like I said before, this is the big one. This is what the International Energy Conservation Code gets at. The less energy a building uses, the less emissions that building is creating. And then if you are also using less energy and you want to integrate renewable energy to your building, you don't need as much to, this kind of comes from that all electric piece. There's demand flexibility, which is kind of a newer concept. And basically that's the use of control technologies in your thermostat, or appliances are developing. There's new tech with demand response appliances. And that basically shifts your electricity use across the time of day, hopefully while maintaining the quality of that end use. But it just helps if the grid has more renewable energy coming onto it, kind of balancing that demand piece and supply piece. And then on-site solar, and then energy storage, so you can access energy use in the case of possibly an outage or some sort of emergency. So key takeaways here, there's something called commissioning, which is basically a monitoring method. And that is the intent of commissioning is to ensure sort of proper installation and operation of your mechanical, your electrical, your plumbing systems. And this can happen at all stages of the development of a building. Basically what this is ensuring the building's running efficiently, and it helps with catching errors, malfunctions. If repairs are needed, all that can be caught early and can help an owner save money, but also continue to reduce energy use throughout the lifetime of the building.
All right, you're about 2 minutes away. So
cool, that's mostly all I've got. As far as green building concepts, the rest is just on certifications and standards that exist. And then sort of that good, better, best practices. And good, you're at the minimum, you're doing your 2018 IECC code. Better basically deploys additional strategies to make the building more efficient, to make that, bring in those more comprehensive sustainability strategies in those other categories besides energy use. And then best is taking all of that, maybe pursuing some sort of building certification at a high level, like a LEED gold or platinum certification, all electric systems, you're diverting your construction and demolition waste. This is basically taking everything that I just talked about and applying it. And that would be the best, but good is still good. And then opportunities for Sunnyside, that's something that I'll let you guys think about. And then that's all I've got. Sorry, that was so much information thrown at you, but I appreciate you guys being attentive and hanging on through that presentation.
Thank you, Claire.
Yeah.
You know, I think there is a lot of stuff in there that I think in the future we can kind of talk specifically about, you know, different sections. And if we think about some of the opportunities, I think some of the opportunities that we could have is working with, you know, CASR, Climate Action, Sustainability and Resiliency, our agency in the city. In fact, I was someone from that agency had reached out, kind of like, "Hey, you want to come talk to the neighborhood?" You know, and I wanted to figure out what's the best place to have him. But there are a lot of programs, and they're trying to deploy them, and there's a lot of money available. I mean, for instance, you know, e-bike library is something that, you know, they're willing to pilot and put in. That could happen in our neighborhood. You know, I think Excel I just saw an article in the Colorado Sun. Excel has like these, you know, community solar gardens that, you know, they're putting money into it, you know, to make these happen. So there are lots of maybe things that are possible, not just, you know, asking developers to, you know, do the best they can or get LEED certification, but there may be other opportunities in the neighborhood. And Claire, if, you know, you're going to continue working with our sustainability, I think, you know, you'll start, you know, seeing maybe some of these opportunities as well, and maybe working on some of them. So I appreciate your time on this. And I encourage everybody to flip through the rest of the presentation. And if we have a specific questions and want to have Claire back, you know, I'll be glad to invite you again to kind of dive into anything specific that folks have a question on, but there's a lot of information and a lot of things I didn't know. So I appreciate you sharing that and putting this together for us. So thank you very much for that.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Yep, thanks. And Matt, if you want to jump and if you want to stop sharing, yeah, you already have. And then Matt, if you want to share yours, then we can kind of dive into and kind of finish up that conversation about what does this look like and what do we think could, you know, what are the layers we need to be thinking about on top of just the massing?
Hi, everybody.
Nate.
So yeah, we gave the presentation last week, or last month, more on developer constraints, what kind of happens. You know, I think the concept of getting a pro forma, that's tough to get out of those guys. And, you know, we all tried. And for good reason. It's, you know, you asked me, Trupti, you know, how do you kind of manage all of this? The trick is every site is different. And so, but I would also say that, you know, adhering to some kind of higher standards, it gets absorbed into the district. It's more of a consideration of what do you want to build in the future. And I would say that, you know, I would maybe recommend for this group or a bigger audience is to do a walking tour of some of the neighborhoods that are in Denver today, because a lot of what we're looking at in terms of a landmass, when you talk about this whole area, really kind of this is what's there today, right? And what's coming across on Fox Island. You can see a lot of similarities to other districts that have been created in Denver. The initial riverfront plaza area, the new River North, The 38th and Blake Street is probably a pretty close akin to this. And how all of those kind of factors and what do we do to put in the right kind of allowances for density, because that is part and parcel what we have to do here, is create some density and get homes around the networks that we've built, the light rail, the bike, even the car, right? You know, this is one of those nexuses within Denver where the connectivity of all of those transportation hubs really come together. And how does that react to the existing 1- and 2-story single family residential bungalow neighborhoods that we love and all moved into this neighborhood for? So it's going to be that balance between what is the right district for this and, you know, how do you elevate it? So
That's
And
a
like
that's a
you
great
said-
idea. This kind of a tour of some of this stuff. Do you want to moderate that? I could probably
I
find us
just
some money.
told myself to do it.
Like, I could probably find us some money and from a grant to because we could do it on bike. and we can
The
have
bike
some
tour
fun.
would be kind of fun. We just have
Let's-
like a
let's think
breweries
about it.
and
I
we
think it's a
go
great
look at
idea.
some buildings and talk about massing and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I'll put that on the radar for down the road. Thank you. But
Okay.
yeah, let's talk about kind of what that looked like. And, you know, I think we kind of stopped with kind of that big picture. And I don't, you know, the last time. And then we're like, whoa, this is pretty cool. Okay, the meeting's over. So, you know,
Yeah.
let's pick up from where we left off.
So we, went back to your guys's drafts of what has been done in the NPI.
Yep.
Took a couple of those sketches, made them a little bit more hard line and reality based in terms of what are some of these nodes that are starting to get created? What are these opportunities within some of the infrastructure that's remnant, right? That railroad spur offers a really unique opportunity to brand an entire district, right? That's what we're looking at here in this neighborhood is a district. It's not just SUNY. This is a place and a hub that can really start to come together. So just kind of recognizing that, as we've talked about, Jason Street being that more retail corridor, Lipan being that more kind of secondary but commuter arterial. You've got a major over here on Pecos. We know there's a TIF coming over here and some connections to Fox Island and this whole redevelopment of the post building as this kind of other half to this conversation, right? And what is the response on this side? Is it more pared down or is it celebratory and recognizes some of the density that we do need to create? I think that's one of the things that I will stress as an urbanist. Density is good. It reduces resource use. It reduces travel and distance, but it has to be done in a balance of what is the right for the neighborhood, and some of it may be aggressive, some of it may be too much, and how do you balance that? So those are all the discussions I know that are being had and will continue to play out. We look at it as, the current zoning, right? This is a big part of what's going to happen is how do we take all this kind of low industrial 2-3 story and really start to envision. We took a look at some of, how does that mass up from a volumetric standpoint? And then we looked at what's been considered by the MPI today, the CMX5, the 12 across the way, the 3, some of the GMU 3 that sits within the the Quig Newton and what's going to happen with that. You can see the density starting to creep up, but then it kind of tapers back down.
What's with the 3 though? The CMX 3, that actually just doesn't make sense. That should be either 5 or it should be 8. What, I mean, and I don't know if that's actually gonna change. That's where it is today, I believe, right? CMX 3?
I think you're going to find that where, you know, this was that intended tier up, and
Yep.
this is what's in Blueprint Denver today.
Yep.
And that line kind of stopped right here. And so this is that tier up to the train station, and that was the bulk of it. And then what does it do over here? Because
Correct.
this has been the piece that's being really debated today.
Correct.
And how does this come all the way to Pecos? And what do you think about for these whole blocks, right? What you got to really look at is this tier down from this corner, because this is that protected district and should remain. That's the beauty of this neighborhood. That's why we all moved here.
Mhm.
But this is the opportunity through here, right? And what does that become? So
Sorry.
Yep.
Quick question. What is that CMX 3 designation?
I think that's so this was based off of the NPI's just kind of initial mapping. So we just took the last presentation that Trupti sent us and overlaid kind of what we saw from that and kind of gave some proposed densities. And this is a relatively what that was. It's
forgive me, I don't know. So is the CMX
Zoning
3
code.
or 5 versus 8 a density measure?
Yeah,
yes.
stories.
Okay, so
Got it.
the 3, the 5, the 8, that's number of stories.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So Denver has, with the form-based zoning, every piece of land has a designation. You can see there's R, it starts with a denominator of C, U, G. Those all kind of set up the first bit of context that we work within. The next piece is whether it's mixed use, residential heavy, some UTC, that's single family, OS,
2
it's
unit.
open space.
Two unit.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Thanks.
that's how we kind of look at the city, and it gives us a whole set of parameters on what we can build within those individual blocks.
I see.
Okay.
And then for further background, all of this was basically, most of it was 1 story. Some of it was as tall as 3. And so we've seen with the idea of getting rid of all the industry and bringing in housing that we're going to build up.
Got it.
And you know, just to be clear, I think there's a lot of interest in also retaining jobs. So I think, you know, there, to what Claire was saying before about, you know, would we have first floor, you know, commercial and top and above that residential? I think that's a real possibility, because I think keeping jobs and keeping some of this industry is also of interest overall to the city, to obviously the businesses that are there. So I think there is something more than just residential. At least that's what people are saying, that keeping those jobs. I think I've heard something like 1,000 jobs are there. That seems like a lot, but you know, so if that's the case, that's a balance that MPI has to consider too, is how to keep jobs and add the density, which would be like first floor, whatever, and then housing above it.
And so when you talk about that, Trupti, there's kind of 2 levels of that we look at within the industry, or within urban planning is, you know, you've got IA is what it's currently zoned, which is a light industrial. So food products, a lot of the carpentry, some of the really established businesses around this corner have been thriving. One of the things that we're seeing though with industrial is that the plants are getting larger, the footprints are getting larger, and the space needs for them they've kind of changed, and you're seeing that migrate more towards the north. You can kind of see that in this image here, where some of that and even further up, those are kind of meeting today's industry standards.
Yeah,
Right.
they're
We
not
still
planning on
want-
changing them. It doesn't
Yeah,
look
we s-
like there's a recommendation to change that section of Chaffee Park. Yeah, that
Yeah.
looks like it's gonna stay.
Yeah, that's some pretty solid and embedded industrial. So what we're looking at over here are some that next tier down, right? That square footage is in that 15 to 25,000. You've got a couple of bigger blocks along the tracks that get to that 50 to 100,000, but it's not quite meeting today's needs, or it's been, split up in a lot of different ways. So some of it is, yes, you want to keep that, and that's part of the character, and definitely retains those jobs. Industrial in that terms is still industrial, right? What you're talking about is more of that CMX kind of district, which is retail and active use at grade. And that's all dictated by the CMX zoning that eventually this district will start to be zoned into the more current state of what its future use will be versus what its historic use was, which was IA.
I think you might have said this last time, but what do we think the total number of units, if we are looking at all of the stuff in that section that you highlighted on the map, how many additional units are we looking at there?
So it kind of depends, with the CMX 5 here and CMX 8 here and kind of tearing up towards here, it's half the density if you started to look at this at 15, 16s, right? This is probably around 3,500 to 4,000 units.
In that entire pink area that you're playing with?
Yeah, and that's really kind of looking at this more northern half, some of this in here. But you got to remember, like, I realize that these buildings look big, even the ones over at 38th and Blake.
Mhm.
They're getting to a scale that it feels a little overwhelming, right? Especially next to some of the industrial and single story product that exists there for century, right? Those buildings only hold between 300 to 400 people. So while they feel big,
Mhm.
the scale of them is we're talking about densities in Denver where 10,000 people per month moved here for 10 years, right? We did that study with ULI a decade ago, and our ability to build total number of units in Denver is about 12 to 15,000 units per year, and we're never keeping up with that. So when we think about future proofing our city, and when we look at resiliency and energy and all of the things that we just heard about from a sustainability, density is part of that.
Mhm.
And thinking about how smart density occurs, right? Buildings that come right up to the street frontage. Denver's got a unique grid where it's 120 by any number of 400, 500, 600 foot blocks. It leads us to some very specific typologies in architecture. C buildings, I buildings, bar buildings, and how we break them down. There's a couple over in around the neighborhood that do a good job of stepping from one corner to the other and really massing themselves up, but still maintaining a high level of density. There's cost to it, there's expense to the development, but they ultimately, I think, give us a better city in the long run versus some of the larger big blocks, right? Breaking down that mass, keeping the scale of the blocks smaller. Those are tricks that we got to balance between the yields that need to be achieved from the development cost against how dense and big do buildings feel and are approachable.
So Matt, we're just about out of time. We've got a
Yep.
minute. Here's a question to the group. Okay, great. I love that. you might have to keep coming back because you said you are not able to share this document with us for us to look at it. But my question to the group and Matt is, what's kind of the next layer that we should be thinking about on this, right? So we got these big structures, great. You're adding trees. We should be thinking about what that heat island piece of it would be. Should we be looking at, within a quarter mile, there's a park for everyone, and maybe Chianco and La Raza cover that, but do they? I don't know. So do we need to add a park, So I'm trying to think of what layers should we be adding and thinking about as we think about, well, we're building a place here, and how would it look if like you're showing us right now? Are there additional layers that we should be thinking about? And should we be thinking about, a Dr. Cog transportation kind of piece? Like, I think the transportation piece is a big thing that it's kind of unknown to us. And unless the city tells us this stuff, we don't really know. So if we have 3,000 more units, hopefully with not as many cars, but what does that do to La Pan and Pecos? As far as folks trying to get in and out of this area. Is that a layer that we should be thinking about, right now, or we could wait years for the city to come to tell us?
I think it's being discussed already,
Mhm.
right? The transportation networks, the connection of Fox, that bigger multimodal thinking at all scales, from how do we move down the bike lanes from all the way in my neighborhood to the light rail, to how the light rail can serve more capacity, how the connectivity of the roadways can allow better movement of vehicles. And I mean, there's realities that have to be faced, which are some streets have to be dedicated towards arterial, right?
Right.
It's just a recognition of and a growth of that neighborhood to accept that. And parking is always a conversation. Right.
No, but I mean, I'm actually, so parking, yes, but I'm really more concerned about just overall flow of traffic. So yes, Dottie's working on this. Maybe the next step for this group is to invite them to share us what they're doing or looking at or seeing. And unless somebody else on this call has seen this stuff, where specific to Sunnyside and not Fox Park, but specific to Sunnyside and its growth and development, what does the transportation network look like? What kind of changes we may need to see? Is anybody on this call aware of that work, has seen that work? Or is this something we should be pursuing to bring to this group so that we can learn?
I mean, I would look to Melissa to bring in, a couple of the city representatives. I mean, the work that's going on with Fox Island is predicated on 10 years worth of work of the light rail, right? All the RTD district.
Okay, so it would be something of value for me to pursue for a future meeting to kind of talk about, what does the transportation network look like once the city is kind of built out, or our neighborhood, specifically Sunnyside, is built out? And Melissa, would you be able to help us kind of, get some folks to the table here to, you see what
I'm happy to connect you.
Yep.
The reality is that a lot of city agencies struggle to come to these evening meetings. We're simply understaffed throughout the city. Almost every single department is severely understaffed. But I'm happy to connect you and help you make those asks. I think it could be beneficial. The other thing I would recommend to you is to use your Dottie representative.
Yep.
To make any questions and concerns known, so that they can take those into account.
Melissa, do you know from the MPI and some of the Fox Street stuff, is Dr. Cog run scenarios over here for that?
I don't know that, honestly.
Okay, I can tell you a little bit about that. They were run specific to that. I've been like asking for stuff and they're just been like, not really. I mean, I've got lots of emails back and forth about Dr. Cog right now with Dottie and the developer. But more, my concern was most how that impacts us, right? And I think there are some graphs with just the volumes. And I just can't get a clear, we are over, clear information on like, how many units did they model into on the Sunny side to come up with those numbers? So I'm looking for those kinds of things. It is Dr. Cog's focus model that they used, but they're, not sharing too much more. But I think we might be able to get the consultant group, not Triba, but Piers and Ferris is who did it, to see if they can maybe share what was used from the study side, development into this larger network piece. That's what I don't know. But yeah, Melissa, if you can just connect us. And is that Karen Good? Is that who we should be working with?
She could be the representative, but she's most likely what you're looking for. Are you looking for traffic studies? Because I mean, so I used to work in District 10, right? So I'm more familiar with Cherry Creek North. Cherry Creek North zoning was all done based on traffic projections, but that was a study that the neighborhood paid for, not the city.
Right.
That's how they were able to get their unique zoning, right? That was all designed based on these traffic studies.
Yep. And just, I'm talking to Casser about some of these grants, and a traffic study could be something that they can imagine, a transportation, I guess, transportation management, or, is something that they might be a grant for next year that we can think about. But yeah, for now, I'm just trying to understand not just the impact of Fox Park to the neighborhood. I really want to know the impact of our neighborhood growth plus Fox Park to our neighborhood. And that's what I can't really get a clear answer on. So if you could just, if it's not Karen, if you could just give me a contact who might be able to help,
Why don't you write out what you're looking for? So give me an email with some of your questions and I'll
Okay.
make sure that gets forwarded on.
And actually, anybody on this group, if you have any specific questions regarding the, I don't want to just call it a traffic study, but yeah, this transportation, level of service, although I don't even know if that's a great marker, but if anybody has questions about what we've been talking about, please send them to me and I will put something together for Melissa, and we'll kind of go from there about how do we learn more about this. Does that sound good? We are about 7 minutes over, so gonna need to adjourn this meeting unless anybody has any final comments or questions or anything. All right, is everybody good? All right, guys, then, thank you very much. Thanks, Claire and Matt. Matt, I'm gonna take you up on
was
that.
really great.
That tour. I think that tour, it would be really cool, and we can figure out how to pay for some beers afterward or something. Sounds good. Thank you very much, guys. More
Thanks
to
for your
come.
time, everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Take
Thank
care.
Bye.
Bye.